Okay, so it's been a few weeks since I did any YouTubing. I took a bit of time off because I started my new job and I've been working 6-day weeks. A lot to talk about. Um, Obviously, here domestically, we've seen a few big announcements. We've seen that the English Ice Hockey Association are looking at having some trial events with fans in attendance at some point in the new year. That's going to be interesting, and there could be a restructuring of the governing body and the league structure going forward because from the elite league down, there's concerns that teams will go out of business and arenas and arena owners going out of business. So that's something as a side note going on, but there's no 100% concrete plans for British ice hockey to return to the ice. Obviously, the World Championships next year will they take place like they were postponed last year, so we just don't know what's going to happen. Rugby League, the Super League, a whole host of matches in recent days have been called off due to positive COVID tests. We're seeing a really high amount of positive tests in playing groups. So, can the Super League season be completed? That'll be interesting. See what happens there. Uh, Premier League side of things, the pay-per-view TV package has been roundly condemned by fans. The plans for a European Super League have gone down like a sack of shit with fans, and the plans to restructure the Premier League that were put forward by Liverpool Man United didn't go down well either. So there's some breakdown in trust between fans and the sport basically. Obviously, Marcus Rashford's done his bit for fundraising, and fans have done their bit for fundraising for food banks and other charities during this time. And there is obviously the debate about how you restructure and reform governance of football, not just here in England, but across the world. The NRL has completed. The NRL has completed its grand final. Melbourne winning 26 points to 20 against Penrith. A lot of people expected that result, but obviously, if you're a Penrith fan or you go for the underdog, it didn't play out. Cameron Smith, has he played his last game? State of Origin is looming in the NRL. The AFL's completed their grand final as well. That was played in Queensland because the state Victoria is in lockdown. The Major League Baseball has had their World Series literally take place the other day. Finally got that completed. The NHL's obviously had the Stanley Cup won by the Tampa Bay Lightning. NBA is looking at a restart date before the end of the year. The NHL has not announced a restart date, looking like to be February, as the AHL has announced that the first week of February will be the restart date there. There's all sorts of, crazy things being broached about a lot of sport. On the European Super League side of things, which I think is where we're going to start, it won't get off the ground. FIFA are now on the back foot because obviously the outgoing Barcelona presidents dropped a bit of a bombshell on them saying we've been in discussions. FIFA are trying to hush that up, but you can see where Man United and Liverpool are coming from with their plans to restructure the English Premier League to 18 teams. And bearing in mind the current Champions League format is in place until 2024. UEFA are unhappy, and fans have roundly condemned the European Super League, European Premier League, whatever you want to call it. It's been roundly condemned by fans. The Premier League pay-per-view fiasco, 78 fans, I think, paid for Burnley, West Brom. The amount of fans that are going on illegal streaming has hammered that one. There are plans to keep that going for another month. My idea is to restructure and governance of English football, at least. Start from this. Now, I will mention the Newcastle takeover because I know smoking kills, but I don't care because I've had no days off since I started my new job, apart from Sundays, and I get a day off this Saturday, so I'm so happy. And this is why I haven't been on YouTube, because I've been working 6-day weeks for the last month, and I'm knackered. And I don't care smoking kills. I'd rather have a fag and de-stress and chat about things. Yeah, the new job's busy. It's the same industry as I was before, just a rival company. So no change in what I'm doing. My last job, I had lots of issues with how the company ran things and bits and pieces, and there was a lot going on there that didn't agree with me. This new job, I don't have to be as an important position, as in I'm doing the same job, but I have less issues with dealing with management, so I'm a little bit less stressed. But it's been a long day. Lots happened last night with some of my colleagues getting in a fight. One of them is in police cells right now. It's just been a crazy couple of days this week. We've had staff fired, suspended, arrested. Oh, it's just been a nightmare. Waste disposal is an interesting industry, but ideas to reform English football. I think you need more fan involvement. There needs to be an independent regulatory body, which Bernstein, Neville, and others have mentioned. That's been brought forward. That's an idea that's been broached by Sidney Bernstein, the former FA chairman. Gary Neville is an ex-player, Denise Lewis, an ex-athlete. There's a couple of lawyers involved. They've come in and they've said football can't regulate itself, can't reform itself. We need an independent regulator. That is correct. There needs to be more fan involvement. This is where I get to the Newcastle takeover. Right? Only one club in English football has fans involved with running the club, and that is Exeter City. They're one of the few clubs in the lower leagues that runs at a profit. That tells you something. I think there needs to be a salary cap and a spending cap. And while people are, oh, you can't do that, you can, because there's no way a team or a club will overpay players and unbalance their squad, because it's a squad game. You need depth, as proven by so many Premier League winning teams. Is they have good squad rotation and good depth. Those teams that do not have good squad rotation and poor depth and overplay players and bad transfers come back to haunt a football club. There is no salary cap. Financial fair play doesn't work. It doesn't. And what we've seen with the Newcastle takeover is other clubs can basically voice their concerns via the Premier League and say we want this takeover not to go ahead. That's what happened with Newcastle. A couple of clubs, including Tottenham, for example, poked their head in. The idea that Man United and Liverpool come up with restructuring the Premier League is heavily weighted in their favour. In the short term, they're trying to offer a bribe to the lower leagues to allow this restructuring of English football to take place, which means several teams will have to drop out the Football League, which means a lot of clubs, it's ridiculous. Tottenham being classed as one of the big six, they haven't won anything since the League Cup in 2008 with Martin Yeo. They never even won the Premier League. The last league title they won was in the 60s. Apart from winning a couple of League Cups in the last, over a decade ago, they haven't been successful. They've choked their way out of Premier League titles in the last 4 or 5 seasons. They've choked their way out of FA Cups and Champions League finals. And I'm thinking to myself, it took 30 years for Liverpool to win their last league title. The last time Liverpool won the league before they lifted the trophy a couple of months ago, I was 6 months old. Yes, they won Champions Leagues and UEFA Cups, now the Europa League. They've won FA Cups, League Cups. They haven't won the league for 30 years. Suddenly they win it, and suddenly, whilst they're running away with the league, they and Man United concocts this this idea that we will to make us more money and skewer the voting rights. And quite rightly, West Ham, one of those clubs that were given protected status, said we're not in favour of this, because ironically, and this is what's ironic, Liverpool have actually spent time outside the top flight. The idea that any club is invincible forever is flawed. Everton, I think, are the only club who've never, ever, ever been outside the top flight in their history. That tells you something. Man United spent the best part of 20 years being the most unsuccessful big club in this country. They were doing a Liverpool. They couldn't win the league. They could barely win other titles. So it's ridiculous to say that you should protect 6 to 9 clubs and give them special rights over the other 81. It makes no logical sense, and it unbalances the whole structure completely. The European Super League plan is linked to Man United and Liverpool getting away, which now they're not, because the idea has been completely scrapped and has been voted against. The issue is what we have seen since March is clubs being exposed for bad management financially. They're massively overspending, and with the financial, fair play rules being broken and the punishments being so weak and easily overturned, football, can't regulate itself. The Champions League, UEFA have a deal in place where the current structure, as it stands, with the current group stage and the knockout stage, is till 2024. The idea for this European Super League was to take place in 2022. The problem is they're saying they'll get an extra 10 times as much cash for the winner or participants, right? That's great. Who's going to pay for it? Because fans aren't in favour of it, so fans are boycotting and they're not able to sell tickets. If their own fans are boycotting and threatening to boycott and protest, it won't go ahead. UEFA haven't sanctioned it, which means these clubs are going against UEFA, which means they'll be thrown out of their domestic competitions because the domestic FAs haven't sanctioned this either. This is clubs as a small group a small group basically saying, we don't care what the governing body of our country or our continent does. The pure greed of these clubs who are involved in this meeting. Allegedly. I mean, these plans surface once or twice a decade and don't get past the planning stage. Simple. It's madness, because in the short term, for like a season or two, I didn't see what Wenger said about it, but from what I've seen on social media to do with the pay-per-view TV, which went down like a lead balloon, the idea that a couple of clubs can restructure the whole entirety of domestic and intercontinental football whilst not actually discussing it with the governing bodies is a joke. And it shows the greed of the sport at a time when you and me, I mean, I'm lucky the job that I do is sort of a safe job. But others, football is not reading the room. Clearly, they're not reading the room. They seem to be living in a bubble that cannot sustain itself. I think the issue is these clubs won't be successful forever, and every club will get to a point where they go through a lean spell. It's fact. It's utter fact. Every club. And it's all about pure greed. And the fact that fans, not just here, but across Europe, have roundly condemned the idea. If you can't get your own domestic fan base on side, you're purely selling this to the foreign audience. And fans are already angry about the fact that kickoff times are being changed for overseas and for the TV companies. The TV companies have faced a massive backlash in recent months. Massive backlash. So ideas to reshape and restructure the league, I think independent regulatory bodies is a must. Football has shown itself to be greed orientated. The lower leagues are, in the long term, gonna struggle. The bread and butter leagues. The pay-per-view idea really hasn't gone down very well. If 78 people paid to watch Burnley West Brom, I believe it was Burnley West Brom. And don't get me wrong, these are not like clubs with tiny fan bases. These are Premier League clubs. These are clubs that are historical. West Brom is a sizable club in the West Midlands. The West Midlands has several million people living there. You've got Birmingham City, Aston Villa, West Brom, Wolves, Walsall. You've got several clubs in the West Midlands. The pay-per-view idea, I hate pay-per-view. If you're already paying for a TV subscription and then you're paying that on top, it's wrong. I think the idea, and this is the problem, is the current TV deal is wrong. It's hopelessly imbalanced, and has been hopelessly imbalanced since 1992. Pre-1992, yes, because some people believe that the Premier League is the history of football, and don't remember before 92 that league football had Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, Division 4, and then the non-league. The TV deal was much more evenly balanced towards the lower league clubs, hence why less clubs were going bust. The Premier League tried this. They had their own little pay-per-view, Premier League pay-per-view about a decade or so ago, and it was crap. No one bought it. It failed after a season. They scrapped the idea very, very quickly. Yes, the NHL has its, and the NFL have the the NFL network, the NHL network. Again, there's flaws in that system with the blackout games. The idea of having a TV blackout in certain games is to protect fans going to games and attendances. We don't have fans in attendance right now, so that TV blackout should be completely scrapped. Now, the thing is, when the TV deals were signed initially, and they were, it's social media and streaming websites. They weren't a thing back in 1992 when the idea of the TV deal. But since '92, the amount of lower league clubs that have hit financial difficulties is ridiculous. And yeah, I mean, other leagues have worked out a great way to grow their sport or their league or to reach a wider audience is free streaming. on things like YouTube and other video sharing platforms. It's an amazing thing. You reach a wider audience by making it more accessible and cheaper. If it's free to wear or cheaper, people will watch. Um, Even then, Amazon, it's only so long it will stay so cheap before they start jacking up the price. But we need to look at the media rights deals, not just for football, but a whole host of sports. Because you look at rugby league in this country, it's a mess. You look at cricket, it's all behind a paywall, and attendances have plummeted. And there's massive issues within the sport, and financial structuring, and then the direction of the sport. Rugby unions got concerns about the, the free to air rights and status of the Six Nations going forward. And they put England games on Sky for a couple of years, and then the viewership figures completely dropped off a cliff. So they were put them back on free to air TV. Apart from the autumn internationals, and fans aren't willing to pay anymore. And I don't think long term it's going to be sustainable. The long term health of sport, I think the sports will still be played. It's a given. The sports will still be played. But I think long term, and this is where restructuring sport and balancing of the TV deals and exposure of sport is going to change. I cannot see how long term, especially in football, that the salaries can be maintained at the rate they are. I can't. Because if the lower league clubs start going bust in greater and greater numbers, the quality of the product you get at the end, with the lack of player depth and the lack of player development, will be such that you'll be paying for an inferior product. I don't know what's going to happen with the NFL. There's a lot of discussions with upcoming CBAs, and the NHL renegotiated their CBA during the lockdown and got played to resume, and they haven't even come up with an official start date for this season. The AHL have come out and said February the 5th. Now, the AHL is an affiliate league to the NHL, it's the league below. So a lot of players are on two-way contracts. So if they've said February the 5th, well, the NHL hasn't confirmed anything yet. We'll see what happens. I can't believe the NFL have said they're going to go full capacity for the Super Bowl. That's just, at this current time, insanity. But it's America, so take into that what you want. But at the moment, I think I have some grave concerns about the structures and the integrity of sport going forward. Football is a prime example of a sport that is badly governed, and there's too much agent involvement. There's too much club power. Yes, we need fans at stadiums, and yes, there are some plans for some trial events. Again, but the government here in this country, for example, they've been so vague on when fans will be allowed back in, and the vagueness is causing a problem because a lot of clubs in various sports and a lot of teams have spent a lot of money to make their venues COVID secure, right, compliant. And then the decision was made, bang, a month ago, no fans in stadiums. The pay-per-view idea, and my thoughts on it is, it's just make those games free to wear, free stream. Use platforms like YouTube, use platforms or video sharing websites, or set up your own free or paid subscription streaming service. I mean, that's how I watch the NRL, and that's how I'll be watching the AFL next season. Is I'm signing up. I've signed up for the NRL streaming. It's cheaper for the equivalent of one match on the Premier League pay-per-view. I get a whole. It's a month's worth of subscription, so I get a whole NRL season. I watched every single NRL game, plus all the finals and the grand final, for £130 for every game. Okay, that's £12.50 a month, which is actually cheaper than a one-off payment for one game per night. This is how greedy the Premier League is. Okay, now only one club voted against that pay-per-view policy, and that was Leicester City. So 19 Premier League clubs voted in favour of putting that in place. And fans basically told them enough's enough. And fans before COVID were saying ticket prices are getting out of control. And there's a reason for that. Partly to do with the TV deal, partly, partly because the players are overpaid and the agents' fees are extortionate and the transfer market is bloated. The financial management of football is a mess. There is too much money in the game, too much money in the sport, and it's causing more problems than solutions. We were told that ticket prices would stay low and the game would be affordable and there would be so much investment and all the leagues would benefit from the TV structure of the TV deal we have in place. It's not the case. And the fact that clubs are facing going out of business is quite worrying. And if I don't know where to go with it, but I think I will have to do a video on my ideas for reforming English football. And part of it is to have more fan say, more fan involvement in the running day of the clubs, more fan feedback in rule changes. Because look at VAR, that's a mess. That's a waste of money. I think what we need to have, and this is I think something that football globally needs to really consider: salary caps, spending caps, so transfer budgets. Each club has to have the same, transfer budget, make it level playing field. Because what we're seeing is the same clubs winning over and over again, and that becomes pretty boring when you have a lack of competitiveness. It's not good. And if you've only got things like Direct TV, then again that's a problem. So only some of these deals are only available for certain people. But no, the media rights for sport needs to be looked at, especially football. The FA itself needs restructuring. That's been discussed for several years now. We've had parliamentary inquiries into the governance of football in this country. So there's lots to discuss there. Football is in a mess. And the warning from the Huddersfield owner that 50 to 60 clubs could go out of business before December is starting to look more and more likely as each day passes. Whether this pay-per-view plan by the Premier League continues past next month, I don't know. I don't know, because the mass boycott and the fans have now gone, right, instead of paying that money, the Premier League, we're going to raise money for those in need. Several clubs have raised nearly, I don't know how much it is. It's a silly amount of money. It's a silly amount of money clubs, fan bases have raised. Yeah. The Amazon rights are actually pretty crap. They're only the Boxing Day and New Year's Day games. So you only get to watch 2 games on that package. They only get a handful of games and you only get 2 games on that package. So it's a waste of money, really. Streaming side of things, I don't know what happens with there's lots of things up in the air because a lot of sports, their CBA and media deals run out next year. The NHL, ESPN could get the rights back off NBC for the American market, and Fox obviously has regional broadcast rights. So the NFL, the NHL, Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball is a really weird one when it comes to its media rights because it doesn't have a national carrier. The Major League Baseball has multiple carriers in multiple states. So Major League Baseball is a really interesting talking point. It's the only major league sport in the US that doesn't have a salary cap. So it's a very unbalanced, uncompetitive league in a sense where the rich teams will constantly pay overs and the lesser teams will always have a weaker roster because they can't afford to pay as much. It is just plain fact. I don't. The issue with Amazon gaining all these rights is the only reason why it got the Premier League rights when it did for that package was for many years it never posted any profits. It claimed it was making a loss to avoid paying tax. That 1 year in the discussions for the Premier League rights, it claimed it suddenly made some money and paid some corporation tax in this country. So the Premier League said, "Oh, now you're making money. We'll give you some TV rights." They played a tax dodge to get the TV rights. I don't know what the future holds, but there's a lot of criticism being thrown at Sky and thrown at BT and the clubs as well. Football is in a very tricky position, very tricky position. Um, it does need reform, but it's proven, especially with these plans by Man United, Liverpool, and some other European clubs, the European Super League, for example, that it can't reform itself. Greed is driving the game for the benefit of a few over the benefit for many. And if the Pittsburgh Pirates' whole entire salary was 12 million for the entire squad, yet some teams like the Dodgers play that for one player, shows the imbalance within Major League Baseball, and that's the problem. Another issue is Major League Baseball does not have a universal TV package with its collective bargaining agreement. So when we had the discussion about will Major League Baseball have a season this year, they did. They've just had the World Series. The Dodgers win. Fine. We got a World Series. Problem is, long term, baseball has problems. Baseball is a Major League Baseball is a sport in the US and Canada that regularly shoots itself in the foot. It's the same with the NRL in Australia. It regularly, for some reason, has a capacity for, as I say, for self-harm. Another sport, football, European football, is another sport that has a capacity for self-harm. And all the negative headlines and all the negative response to the plans to restructure the Premier League, to restructure European club football, UEFA aren't amused with this European Super League. They're not. They're very much not amused with the European Super League. For the simple fact is that the Champions League format and Europa League format is in place until 2024. And the ironic thing is, some of these clubs that are wanting this European Super League, most of them, if not all of them, have at some point been outside their top flight. Apart, I think, from Barcelona and Everton in the English restructuring of the English Premier League. It's ridiculous, right? So, and not all of them have. Some of them haven't won the league for a long time. And look at the ownership of these clubs. UEFA would. These clubs could risk getting expelled or banned from UEFA and domestic competitions. These clubs. FIFA apparently, and now the Barcelona outgoing president has dropped the bombshell, and FIFA are trying to distance themselves, because if they risk a war between UEFA and FIFA, that's their biggest regional union of nations is UEFA. It's the wealthiest, the most powerful out of FIFA, are at war with FIFA itself. Most of the money that FIFA gets is from UEFA. The Champions League, the Europa League, the Euros, they make a lot of money from FIFA because they're FIFA and UEFA sanctioned competitions. Because UEFA is a partner member of FIFA. If they get UEFA offside, FIFA loses a lot of money. UEFA aren't happy with the plans of some of their clubs, and these clubs, if they do try and form this breakaway Super League, could be thrown out of UEFA competitions. FIFA, they've got to be careful because there's a lot of negativity towards FIFA. The how do I put this? The trust between countries and FIFA and the trust between fans and FIFA has weakened FIFA's position. FIFA are trying to rebalance that. The Sepp Blatter and corruption allegations and how Qatar got the World Cup, it's not a good look. And if you can't get your existing fan base on side, your existing us, the fact that, the sports fans, if you risk the global game, which they are risking. UEFA could throw these European Super League clubs out of the Champions League and Europa League. They could ban them from those competitions. And then the domestic FAs could also, because it's not a plan that they put forward, could also say, you've gone against our rules, you're out. You're out. And that in itself is a no-brainer. The FA haven't sanctioned this, UEFA haven't sanctioned this, Man United and Liverpool, Tottenham, they could be thrown out of the Premier League. And the English restructuring plans that Man United and Liverpool came up with were voted down, majority, 18-2. 18-2. I think the World Cup in 2022 in Qatar will be a failure. If COVID hasn't gone away, Euro 2020 was going to be pan-continental, and UEFA realised straight away that wasn't a good idea. but they'd signed up to it with all the TV partners and sponsorship partners. And now with what's happening with Azerbaijan and Armenia, it doesn't look like a very good idea because one of the countries that's a host country is at war with another one. So, it's football has proven it can't govern itself, can't reform itself. It needs an independent body to do it. There's too much power with the clubs, and the governing bodies are just at war with each other. It's ridiculous. It doesn't. It's not a good look, and fans aren't buying it. And the plan for the Euros needs to be in 4 countries. If France and Germany have just gone up to national lockdowns again, it's a no-brainer. It should have been always in one country. UEFA admitted from the day they came up with the idea, which was a Platini idea, which they want to distance themselves from. Oh, this may be a problem. And fans were already against it from the get-go. Hub cities are going to be needed. The travel, the quarantine. Next summer is going to be very, very interesting. We may not have Euro 2021. It may never take place. It may never actually take place. The Nations League is already starting to get mixed reviews. And because it's not on free-to-air TV, fans are pretty pissed. They're not happy. NFL Europe. I was asked about NFL Europe. There's a reason why it failed the first time. I think it will fail again if they ever went for it. Too much trouble. The idea the fact they don't even have an NFL team in London, which was the plan by now. I don't know. NFL Europe failed for a reason. Didn't make any money. It bled money for the NFL for years. That's why they want to have just a single cities hosting games. It bled money. And American sports all about the profit. Fans get treated like shit, but they keep buying the product. As long as the fans keep buying the product, as long as they keep buying the product, they'll keep trying to sell it. The problem is, and this is the NFL. I don't. Look. The NFL Europe failed for a reason. It wasn't good quality American football anyway, and it cost the NFL a lot of money. A lot of money. It really hemorrhaged cash, and you're getting second-rate players playing. You're not getting the best product on the field. Don't get me wrong. There's a fan base for American football in Europe because of the amount of North American servicemen who are based over here in the UK and across Europe in NATO bases. There's a lot of Canadians and US personnel based in Europe. But no, it didn't work. It won't work again. I mean, if the fact that the NFL had a plan to already have a team in London by now initially hasn't happened, it's not going to happen. Simple. My thoughts on Manchester United. Well, on a playing standpoint, they're in a transitional phase. They've had 2 decades of success under Alex Ferguson, and now they're going through a patch where they're going through a lot of managers. What happened with Man United and the fan base, and this is the problem. What happened with Man United was the Glazer takeover was actually okay. They won some silverware, fine, but the amount of debt that's been saddled upon the club at a time when finances are very uncertain in the sport is not good. Fans initially, while the success even kept coming under the Glazers, a lot of fans didn't want the takeover to take place. It took place, which just shows how little fans have a say on how their clubs are run. And it's not a good look. And fans right now, with the Man United idea for this restructuring the Premier League, the fans of other clubs, all clubs, were like, even Man United fans. I was seeing on social media Man United fans going, we don't want this. Liverpool Man United fans were saying the idea to shrink the Premier League and kick teams out of the Football League, we don't want that. The fact that other clubs were like, we don't want your structuring plan. And now you know why, because it was concurrent with the Super League talks that they were taking place in secret without UEFA and FA sanctioning. So all these clubs that are having these secret European Super League talks, right, were going against their own domestic FAs and UEFA. My thoughts on Man United off the field is not positive. Not positive at all. On the field, okay, yeah, they're not doing as well as they were under Ferguson. But then you have to look at their structuring of the field and recruitment, scouting, and finances, and it's not good. It's not a well-run club on a footballing sense. On a finance sense, the club is profitable. It's Man United. They've done very well in marketing themselves over the last 28 years. On the field, it's a bit of a mess. I've got my next door neighbour. He's a Man United fan, and he's from Manchester, and he just doesn't want me to talk about the club. I get on with my neighbour really well. He's a really nice guy, but he's a Man United fan. He does have faith in Solskjaer turning it around, and this is what's interesting. When Ferguson first took over in '86, he nearly got sacked 3 times. He didn't have a lot of success in the first few seasons. Man United really struggled. Premier League comes along. There's changes in the style of football, the TV deal, the money coming in, the expansion at Old Trafford, and the Ferguson years is the most successful period in footballing history for a club ever in English football. Liverpool under Shankly and co come close, but that period under Ferguson made Man United the best club in the country. Problem is, the glory days are over. The club is on the field in a transition phase. Some say it restructuring, restructuring, rebuilding. Are they in danger of getting relegated? No, not at the moment. But other clubs that have won the Football League and Premier League have been relegated. Okay, I'm a Blackburn fan. I can tell you that Premier League winning club within 4 seasons was relegated from the Premier League. It has happened. It can happen. So all those saying, "Oh, Man United and Liverpool never get relegated," they have been before. Man United spent many years in the second division in the 70s and the 80s. They were not a very successful team for a very long period of time. I think Van Gaal is the most successful manager since Ferguson that they've had. And I'm giving him kudos for that. Mourinho had some silverware. Both of them got sacked. Both got replaced. Solskjaer, I think, is just taking a pummeling in the media. He's taking a pummeling on social media. But who's really, signing these players? Ed Woodward is not a footballing brain. He's a business brain. I am concerned, not just about Man United, but other clubs as well. Man United does have a lot of debt. And that is a problem. That is a concern. And the lack of fan involvement, how clubs run. You look at what the Glazers took over, the reaction, the FC United of Manchester being set up in protest, and in their limited history, been quite successful in going up the leagues. It won't be long before they're in the Football League. Should play be uninterrupted and we get through, and promotion relegation is restored fully, and we get through, and the league structure is not tampered with too much. FC United of Manchester could actually make it into the Football League. So I have every faith that if that happens, that would be the ultimate kick in the teeth for the Glazers. If FC United of Manchester continue to be a growing club and going up the Football League pyramid, I honestly believe that will be the ultimate best thing for football. When people say clubs are too big to get relegated, Blackburn, Premier League winners, founders of the Premier League, founders of the Football League, at one point we were as low as the old third division. Nearly got relegated to the 4th division in 1979. Burnley, founders of the Football League, nearly got relegated out of the Football League at one point in their history. Nottingham Forest, Leeds United. Nottingham Forest, former European Cup champions, the first team to win the European Cup, to get relegated to the 3rd tier of their domestic competition. And when they got relegated out of the Premier League in '98, people saying Nottingham Forest too big to go down. They went down. They tumbled down the leagues. They still have not got back to the Premier League. It's been 22 years they've been outside the top 5. Coventry City. Leeds United. This is their first season back in 16 years. No club is too big to go down. Aston Villa has spent several seasons, obviously, outside the Premier League, recently got back. In the 80s, they dropped down to the 2nd division. Arsenal haven't always been in the top flight. So, no team is too big to fail. Let's make that clear. No team is too big to fail. Wimbledon, right? Former Premier League team. Moved to MK Dons and they reformed. They collapsed. Wigan Athletic. Look at them now, winners of the FA Cup only 7 years ago. Look where they are now. Oldham, former Premier League, founders of the Premier League. Look what they are now. They're in the right financial shambles. No team is too big to fail. No team. The concern that I have is I think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is actually the most successful of Sir Alexis Ferguson's ex-players in management. He has won silverware, admittedly in Norway. People go, oh, it's only the Norwegian league. He took a team in Molde that had been crap for decades, hadn't won anything for decades, and wins titles with them, wins silverware for the first time in, I think, 2 or 3 decades for that club, and took them to the top of their table. He's proven he can do it. Okay, admittedly in a smaller, less competitive league, possibly. Norwegian football is actually surprisingly quite competitive when you look at the champions and who's where in the league historically. So he's proven he can actually win silverware. But because a lot of these keyboard warrior fans go, saying the Norwegian football doesn't count. It's not important. It's not competitive. To Norwegian fans, it is. So he has got a track record of he's won some silverware. Admittedly, in a smaller league with smaller budgets and smaller fan bases, but he can prove he can win silverware with a club that has been unsuccessful for 30 years and gone through a very lean spell. Took them to the top of Norwegian football, got them into Europe for the first time in 2 decades. What I did at United, he's look. I mean, some of the defeats have been, some of the defensive displays haven't been great, and some of the signings, even before Solskjaer got there, have been disastrous since Ed Woodward has been in charge of director of football. There's no kidding there. I don't know where you go. I mean, United have got a very good track record of developing youth. Marcus Rashford is a prime example of that. The class of '92, another prime example. The concern I have long term for football in general is there's too much money at the top, and if you take the lower leagues out, that's where players develop their skills. That's where players who are a bit older finish out their careers, and actually that experience helps develop those young players. It's the bread and butter, and it creates talent depth. It creates depth of talent. There can be some players who play most of their careers. They come through the youth system at a lower league club and spend a long time there, developing their skills, playing week in, week out, playing a lot of games, getting match experience, getting fit, developing their skill base. And a bigger club sees that and buys them, and they get scouted, and sometimes bought on very, very cheap money. Now the transfer window has got completely out of hand, and now lower league clubs are overspending as well, because the TV deal is crap. If they get their own league, it will fail, because you look at the travel distances. It will become the poorer fan, the working class fan will be priced out. We're already seeing that now with domestic leagues, that fans are feeling priced out and can't afford to go, and fans are switching off on the TV anyway. I think what we've seen is there is the sport is starting to lose its fan base. Fans are starting to switch off, and other sports have an opportunity right now to seize on that discontent and go, come watch our sport. And it's all about how you market yourself. Football's marketing has been really crap. Let's be honest. Every time I see an ad for BT Sport or Sky Sports on social media, you look at the comments section, it's not pleasant reading. And whoever's in charge of their PR department and their social media department's got to be seeing this and going, Christ, we are facing some backlash here. There is a call for more free-to-air football at club level, not outside the cup competitions. There are calls, to bring the Champions League and Europa League back to free-to-air off BT Sport. It's there, but you've got to market your sport right, and this is where other sports, I think, have an opportunity in the next year or two to seize upon the issues within football fandom, because it cannot continue how it is. Can't. Ice hockey in the UK. Well, the English Ice Hockey Association is having discussions about having some trial events, getting fans back into arenas in the coming months, and restructuring their league structure and governance. So a sport has been shut down. A sport has been, shut down. Ice hockey's not. There's no ice hockey taking place right now. That is a sport heavily reliant on gate receipts. Has a crap media deal. in this country, which I think is shocking because it's a very good sport to watch. It's a very fun sport to participate in. It's a very fun sport to get involved in, be it as a volunteer or a club employee, fan. Um, if it was marketed properly and got a better media deal, be it with TV broadcasters or internet streamers, yeah, you could nick fans, but I wouldn't think you would get enough fans in right now. But it's all about marketing. And for some reason, ice hockey doesn't have a great marketing strategy in this country. And the mainstream media seems to ignore it, even though our national side is doing very, very well for the amount of money in the sport and then the level that we play at. The national team is really applying itself with great credit. Rugby league is in a mess. Again, issues with finances and marketing. And now, if I want to get onto this, and this is where I have concerns about, league seasons getting completed. The Super League is having so many positive tests right now. It's quite worrying. That is a concern. Whether the Super League can complete. I was having this debate with a rugby league page that messaged me over the last couple of days on YouTube. Messaged me, left a left a comment in one of the videos that I did on the NRL. Just messaged me and said, "What are you? Let's have a chat." And I said, "Okay, I'll private message you on your Facebook page," and I've got into a conversation with him. And I was reading through his because he does all the rugby league in this country. Or I think it's Rugby League Watch or Rugby League Live. It's one of those. I'll have to check my Facebook in a minute. And I said, what's the likelihood of the Super League not completing its season because of these positive COVID tests? And the issue, he said, was it's looking very likely. And so you have to ask the question of the biosecurity protocols that the RFL have in place. There's been no championship and no League One. And so, if you've got a play, that's a problem. So when next season comes, teams, let's say like the London Broncos or the Sheffield Eagles, haven't played for a year. Put that into perspective. The Championship and League One clubs would not have played for a year apart from Challenge Cup games. A year. That's not good. The RFL had to seek government assistance in the form of a loan of £16 million just to survive the lockdown. It's not enough money. The TV deal was crap. It's worth not a lot of money. Only a handful of teams make a profit. A lot of teams operate at a loss. The fact that Bradford Bulls, I think, have gone into administration 5 times in the last decade tells you all you know about one of the biggest clubs in rugby league in this country. For history and fan base is on its knees. The Widnes Vikings went into administration not that long ago. Rugby league in this country is in a mess. I think with the FA Cup rights going off BBC, that's a big blow for the BBC, but the BBC's got its own problems. ITV getting them back, I think that's a sign that BT Sport is starting to really. BT Sports is hemorrhaging cash, always has hemorrhaged cash. If you're a BT or EE or PlusNet internet customer, the reason why your bills keep going up is you are propping up BT Sport. BT Sport loses money every year. It's hemorrhaged money from the day it was set up. It is losing money every year. The Six Nations debate about rights. If CBC have their way, that will be taken off free-to-air TV, and the reaction to that has been wholly negative. So the debate about free-to-air television when it comes to sport and free streaming, such as using YouTube, which I think is a very valuable tool when it comes to sport. I think making more sport accessible and cheap and affordable is a great way to increase participation and increase viewership. And actually, ironically, you make more money that way long term. Football seems to be the only sport that seems to be driven by greed, and football fans keep buying the product. On the subject of the Rugby League World Cup, I have some concerns about it taking place this time next year. It will be interesting to see what happens. Absolutely. The plan is this time next year, the group stages will be taking place. I've obviously done a video on all the stadiums that were listed and planned to be used. Some notable exceptions there, like such as the DW Stadium at Wigan. Really surprised that wasn't on the list, but the Bolton's the old Reebok Stadium in Bolton is on the list, so that's a interesting one. We'll have to see what happens. 12 months is a very long time, but we'll have to see what happens with the Rugby League World Cup. I can't see the RFL affording it for it not to take place. Teams are qualified now. All teams are qualified, so we'll have to see what happens. That's a wait and see on that one. I can't see if it doesn't take place. I think that would seriously financially hurt the RFL. The fact they've already had to seek government assistance is concerning. We'll have to see what happens going forward with the Rugby League World Cup. We have got 12 months. A lot can change in 12 months. A lot can change in 12 days, as we've seen with these regional lockdowns and tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. This 5-tier Scottish system, the whole national lockdown in Wales, France and Germany going to national lockdowns for the second time. A lot can happen between now and October next year. There's question marks about the Olympics taking place on time. There's question marks about Euro 2021 taking place on time. Will the Super League complete its season? There are teams having to forfeit games because of positive tests. Wakefield Trinity Wildcats, for example, have been hammered by COVID. I don't know what the future holds. If the Super League doesn't complete, there'll be no way of restarting it this season. That will be a financial hammer blow for the Super League. Will the World Club Challenge take place between the Melbourne Storm and the winners of the Super League? That's another question that needs to be answered. Will the World Club Challenge be able to take place? I think that's another question mark. That normally takes place end of February, beginning of March, before the NRL season kicks off, because it's part of the NRL pre-season, but we're already 4 to 5 weeks into if our season is to take place as planned from February. That'll be an interesting one. Normally at this point, we're having the autumn November internationals in rugby league, and state of origin has already taken place. So a lot of restructuring to the league structures of both North Super League and NRL have had to take place in order for play to, restart. The NRL in Australia and the AFL in Australia have proven you can do it. You can put teams in bubbles. You can have host cities. You can have, the New Zealand Warriors, for example, and the Melbourne Storm had to stay away from their families for 6 months. And then the NRL decided to really favour the Storm by moving their families up to Queensland for them, which I don't think sat well with a lot of rugby league fans, considering that the New Zealand Warriors had to give up their families for 6 months, and some players said, "Look, we're going home. We want to be with our families and friends, and we are, yes, we're providing for them, but that's not fair on us." The concerns that I have with the Rugby League World Cup, for example, is how is it? They would have to put teams into bubbles. They would have to change the amount of stadiums used. We'll see what happens. On the side of Southgate staying as manager or not, the answer is I have no opinion on it. Because the Nations League is not on free to air, so I can't watch it on BBC Sport or ITV Player, for example. I have no interest in the Nations League. Don't get me wrong, I love international tournament football. I love the Euros. I love the Confederations Cup. For example, the Confederations Cup is going to take place next year. Yeah, this time next year, the Confederations Cup is going to take place. So how are you going to get the Euros and the Confederations Cup in without disrupting the league seasons is beyond me. And then you've got, obviously, the World Cup being planned for Qatar in 2022. I don't know. I really don't know how international football is going to look. Southgate, on the other hand, I don't know what happens with Southgate. Eddie Jones, there's rumours he may be enticed to work in the NRL. I've been following the NRL obviously all season, and there have been some rumours swirling around that the national side in Australia and some club teams have been reaching out to Eddie Jones because he's a rugby league fan. Let's be honest on that. He has got some ex-rugby league players as part of his coaching setup in the past, and he has worked with rugby league players and coaches on defence and attack and Eddie Jones is I think, he's a divisive coach. He's not everyone's cup of tea, but he does think outside the box. Um, yeah, some of his selections I do scratch my head with as well. There's no denying that. Um, but unlike Southgate, he does think outside the box a lot more. He's a bit more flexible in some of his selections. He's a bit more flexible in some of his coaching techniques. And there are rumours he may go to the NRL or to the Kangaroos setup with rugby league. Those rumours have persisted all season. All season, even before the lockdown, there were rumours circulating about Eddie Jones because his contract, I think, is up next year. I know he extended after the World Cup, but his contract is up at the end of next year. So there are some rumours going around that he may go into some kind of coaching capacity, not a head coach, but some kind of coaching capacity within rugby league in Australia, be it within the NRL club or at international level. There are some rumours there. So that'll be interesting. On no one's going to agree with every coach's selection policy. That's just the way it is. On the Southgate side of things, yes, the way the team is set up, it's set up for counter-attacking football. And what we proved, when we play at our best, it is on the counter-attack. So having so many defensive players on a starting lineup and so many defensive holding midfielders, yeah, it does scratch my head. I do think he has personal dislike for certain players, such as Grealish. Grealish is one of the best creative players in the Premier League right now, and he's having a very good start to the season. And yes, some of his off-field antics, I think, have harmed him. Same with Cipriani with England, with rugby union, with Eddie Jones, and so that does, a coach will see that off-field behaviour and those off-field indiscretions and ill discipline, and go, do I want that in my bubble in the squad? Do I want that negative culture in the squad? And culture is a big word that's used, and sometimes used in the wrong context. But I do think you need to have a positive team culture where off-field indiscretions, no matter how skilled or how useful you are, or what you are as a player on the field, should be taken into account. I do agree with that. But when the player has proven himself as a skilled player on the field, and what he does with the football, or what he does with the rugby ball in attack, or what he does in defence without the ball, working and organising and leading. Grealish is a club captain, and he's the driving force behind Villa and their attack. But also as a leader, look where Villa are in the league right now. They've had a great start to the season. A great start to the season. On the Simmons brothers for England, again, you have to look at the tactics that England as a national side play. Do they fit in with the tactics that Eddie Jones, be it his plan A or plan B or plan C, or however he wants to tactically set up against an opposition, be it France or Italy or Ireland or Wales or Scotland in the Six Nations? Sometimes you have to play your opposition a little bit more. Sometimes you have to outthink the opposition. Now, I remember with the breakdown gate, as we call it, when Italy decided to actually look at the breakdown laws and take advantage of them, and England had no response for 60 minutes. They were confused as fuck. They didn't know what to do. So they changed the laws of the game because Italy embarrassed the biggest union out there because they thought outside the box. I don't know. I really don't know. I think Southgate on an aspect of, I think he is a weak character. He's too nice. He's not ruthless enough. And I think the players openly flouting team curfews in Iceland is symptomatic of a lack of respect for the coaching setup and who he is as a coach. If Stuart Pearce, for example, got the job as England manager, those players don't do that. Whether you agree with Stuart Pearce as a coach or not, and while he was at Man City, he was a half decent coach at Man City. Nottingham Forest didn't work out. But if, let's say, hypothetically, you had Stuart Pearce as manager of England, Psycho Pearce, one of the hardest nosed defenders I've ever seen play, one of the toughest players on the field, a guy who doesn't shirk responsibility, who on his first day as Man City manager, as his first press conference post-match interview in the tunnel, basically said that player played like a load of bollocks, he basically said it was bollocks, the guy deserved to get sent off. Basically said of a player, I forget who it was, I think like Mika Richards had a bad game, or someone of his players at Man City got straight red, cost him the game. He went, that's bollocks. Right? If Stuart Pearce, after he's only got one game as England manager, as an interim after Allardyce's removal, if Stuart Pearce had got the job full time, which I think he at that time, because he'd worked with the youth setup and actually put the platforms in place for Southgate to have all the success. Oh yes, if Stuart Pearce got the gig, or AD Boothroyd, when they were working with the youth setups on the under 17s, under 19s, under 21s, if either Pearce or Boothroyd got the job, these players don't misbehave. They didn't misbehave for Pearce and Boothroyd when they were youth coaches. Boothroyd and Pearce laid the platform for Southgate to then exploit the successes at youth level to get the top gig. The players didn't misbehave under them. They are hard taskmasters, but they're beloved by their players. Players loved playing for Pearce. You listen to the interviews, and regardless of the results, the players would run through a brick wall for Stuart Pearce. The players would run through a brick wall for AD Boothroyd. They would literally run through a brick wall for them. Whether you agree with their managerial stats and how they manage their club teams or how their lack of success or whatever it may be, the players they have coached throughout the years have always stated they would run through a brick wall for those guys. Southgate, you don't hear the players going, "Yeah, I would run through a brick wall for him. I would, I would, quite happily, take one for the team, for the boss." You don't hear that about Southgate. And Southgate played alongside Stuart Pearce in '96. Out of those two, who would you rather defend alongside Pearce? I would rather have Stuart Pearce alongside me than Gareth Southgate, because Stuart Pearce would flatten that centre forward who's giving you a bit of jip all game. And he's got your back if you do make that mistake. He's going to cover for you. I think, look, I'm not a Villa fan, so I can't comment on what Jack Grealish has shown in Southgate in training or what he's seen on the field, but I can't understand why he's not been selected. I had the same debate about Cipriani in the build-up to the last Rugby Union World Cup last year. I think he should have gone to the World Cup because he would have, in that match against South Africa was so organised and physical that Farrell was just so one-dimensional and Ford were too one-dimensional. The tactics that we had on that final, and while I was rooting for South Africa to win, by the way, because I have South African friends and I like the way the South Africans just in your face. They're a gnarly, physical, gritty, bit dirty sometimes kind of team. But they win. They win World Cup finals. England have a habit of losing World Cup finals. We've only won one of them. Right? If you had Cipriani on the field at fullback or at fly half, yes, he's going to be targeted. But then you move Farrell to 12, so you've got a physical inside centre. You can also kick out of hand, and you leave him to create. So in an attacking sense, you want Cipriani on the field. Defensively, you can then have Farrell at 12, who can defend the 10 channel, while Cipriani drops back to the fullback position. You bring the fullback into inside centre, plain and simple. I don't know. That's my opinion on the Cipriani situation. Yes, he's off-field indiscretions at every club he's been at. He's had off-field, most to do with alcohol. So he has an issue with alcohol, and that's something that I think needs to be looked at. And it's cost him his international career. His off-field indiscretions cost him his international career, but what he does on the field, that season he was the best fly half in English rugby union, best fly half, not selected for the World Cup, not even in the squad, not even as a depth player. You bring him on that World Cup final when it's still close, could change the game, because the South Africans, the way they play their style, is very energy sapping even for them. You bring on a player like Cipriani with 25 minutes left, 30 minutes left, their legs are gone, opens up the game. Didn't take it. So people questioning Cipriani's omission. Now, Cipriani said there are younger, more talented fly halves out there. Okay, possibly. But have they been as consistent in that season? No. I would pick him on 4. But make it, and I know on certain terms, he misbehaves in camp. He's gone. You have to have that kind of respect with your coach. Now, the Grealish situation, I think, he's thrown him under the bus. I think there's no trust between Grealish and the manager. I think Grealish will probably say if to the selectors, because Gareth Southgate's got a selection team. I think if Southgate goes, Grealish is back in England side. There is no doubt on that. There is no denying that. While Southgate is manager, Grealish doesn't have a hope. And don't get me wrong, players and managers have disagreed plenty over the years, still been selected. A manager may go, I don't like this guy personality-wise. We don't get on. But my God, is he a good player? We'll have him in the team. He may hate my guts, and I may don't. There are some players, managers didn't even speak, but the manager realised, regardless of the team, bang, I'm having this guy in. We may not like each other. Oh my God, I'm having him. Plain and simple. And some ex-players have said, I didn't like this manager, but my God, he still selected me, because that's called being a professional. I think with way Southgate's handled Grealish and other players, yeah, he's weak. He doesn't strike me as a ruthless manager. Too many players who have failed at club level or have not got good form going into an international break are being selected. How is Kyle Walker in the England squad? He's had the similar amount of off-field indiscretions, yet somehow he's classed as one of the senior playing group. Yeah, the Trippier betting charge, I've discussed that. That, yeah, doesn't sit well with me. He's breached rules, which players have been banned for had lengthy bans for, yet he's still around. Trippier's not a bad player. But yeah, those off-field indiscretions with the betting charge that are still ongoing are concerning. They're still there. Yet Southgate continues to select him. For me, I mean, Arsene Wenger. I think his managerial career is at an end now. You could put Ferguson in there. You could put Alex Ferguson at his peak in the England job, or Arsene Wenger at his peak in the England job. And I don't know. You could say look at any club manager. Harry Redknapp, for example. Would Harry Redknapp tolerate that kind of off-field indiscretion? Probably not. The reason why Big Sam got sacked from the England job was he got involved with an off-field indiscretion. Undercover reporter. But you look at the managers who managed England before Southgate, they did not tolerate off-field indiscretions. And players behaved themselves in camp. Regardless of the results on the field and how successful the team was or wasn't, you look at some of the managers that have managed England and how the players, regardless of their views on the manager, still had respect to go, we are going to behave while international duty is going on. Big Sam, not a lot. Newcastle reapproached him before they approached Steve Bruce. Now, this is what's funny. Steve Bruce was the 7th choice on the list. The 6 managers approached before him all told Mike Ashley to do one, including Big Sam. That tells you the poor management off the field of that club. Hence why I can't. The Premier League the Premier League's dealings with the failed takeover bid are a disgrace. Plain and simple. The way that the Newcastle takeover was handled earlier this year was an absolute disgrace on the Premier League's part. But again, you know, the lack of transparency, and this is where I want to get back to discussing discussing football governance. The takeover process of clubs needs to be more transparent, and there needs to be part of any takeover bid. There needs to be more fan involvement in today. Well, as soon as the takeover bid's taken place, season ticket holders should automatically be shareholders in the running of that club, ownership of that club, because then you actually get a club that works for the fan base. It may mean profits are slightly less, but clubs seem to be better run when fans have involvement. And the only Football League club with fan involvement in ownership is Exeter City. I think they're the only club in League One that turns a profit as well. That tells you something. Exeter City has been voted every season for the last 10 years the best run club in the country. Now, if Exeter City, for example, were to be in the Premier League club, yeah, that would in itself be an achievement if they were ever to make it to the Premier League or the Championship. Oh yeah, oh yeah. I think on the side of the Newcastle takeover, the way the lack of transparency in the process and the protracted process, the sale of Newcastle United, it's been up for sale now for nearly 5 years. Mike Ashley's been trying to sell that club, so pre-COVID. It's not a good look for the Premier League when that deal fell through. It really isn't. Um, and I think Eddie Howe would be a good choice for England manager. With what he did at Bournemouth, apart from last season, he really, with limited means, got the best out of those players. Could he have done a bit better? Possibly. Um, but I think the COVID lockdown did for Bournemouth. They didn't adapt very well in that shutdown. They didn't respond. There are two football clubs in Bristol. It's a two-club city, so you've got a split fan base there. But Newcastle are a club that are the perfect club for a takeover, a perfect club for fan base. It's a loyal fan base. You always sell out that stadium when fans are allowed back in. Always sell out that stadium, regardless if the team are in the Championship. Yeah, Christ, if Newcastle United were in League Two, they would still sell out that stadium. Still, no debate, no debate. No debate whatsoever. You'll be when people say, "Oh, no one cares about Bristol Rovers compared to Bristol City." No, it's a divided city. That rivalry. I've got books on football rivalries and football hooliganism. No, Bristol, the fan base in Bristol is split half and half. It's a two club city. So if Bristol and Sheffield can support two clubs in that urban area, yeah, Newcastle is the perfect club for a takeover. It's a one club city, one club town. Always sell out. It's only in the last season or two that fans have started to boycott under the Ashley era in large numbers. They go week in, week out. Even if the team's getting battered 6-0, they still turn up. You don't see that at other clubs. One of the most loyal fan bases I think I've ever seen is Newcastle United. On the side of, if Southgate was to go, I think Eddie Howe is a prime candidate to get the job. He's out of work right now. He's proven that he can stick around for a long time and develop. Pochettino, I don't see that working. When was the last time you saw an Argentinian in charge of an English national side? Never. It wouldn't happen in rugby union. It wouldn't happen in rugby league. Well, there's Argentinians that play rugby league, but an Argentinian taking over an English national side in any sport, I think that, especially football, God, that would never happen. Club side, yeah, it's happened, but not dodgeball. Maybe on an aquatics program like water polo, yes. But if you were to have an Argentinian at national level, I don't think it would ever happen. Some people say I don't care about the nationality. Others want to say a national job should be done by a person of that kind of origin. I'm of the opinion that an English option should be first, and that's why I think Eddie Howe is a prime candidate for the England job. He's now quite experienced in club management. I like the way his teams play the game. Yeah, we had Sven, we had a Swede, we've had an Italian. Look, Pochettino is an interesting character because of his playing career. I mean, he Argentinian national player who gave away that penalty against England in Japan in Korea 2002, by the way. Played for Espanyol, so he's a solid European level player. He's a top flight player. And yeah, he in management, what he did with Southampton, he really improved them. With Tottenham, he just didn't quite get taken to that next level. But Pochettino's England manager, Christ, that's an interesting one. Whether everyone would buy into that, I don't know. He's a very, very capable club manager. Still hasn't got that success. His spells with clubs have been short. Eddie Howe was the best part of a decade at Bournemouth. He was the longest serving manager in the professional football leagues in England by the time of his departure from Bournemouth. I think it was about a decade. And then over two spells, I think in total he had about 13 years at Bournemouth as a manager. And as a player, he played his entire career there. So Eddie Howe is a loyal servant of his club. I think Eddie Howe. I think would be a better choice for England manager personally. He's seen a lot. That's my personal opinion. Um, I think it is a tie between Pochettino and Eddie Howe if Southgate does get the hook. Um, one good tournament finish, as in getting to the semi-finals, is an improvement on where we were before. Fair enough, but the way we got to the semi-final was not great. And his faith in a goalkeeper who's error-prone, in Pickford, who can't catch the ball to save his life, but makes howlers on a regular basis. Same with Spain with De Gea. Loyalty to a goalkeeper who's error-prone is not a way to build a competent defence where they have confidence in each other. Um, I, I I don't know where things go on the English football side. Eddie Jones, his contract does expire next year, and yeah, it's been a very successful spell with Eddie Jones in charge of the national side. One bad Six Nations is you're going to have a down year because expectations are high. But the rumours linking in with a move to rugby league in the NRL within either the national setup for Australia or a rugby league club in the NRL is there. Um, but the negativity towards Southgate and some of his decisions and some of his tactical positioning, I think, has he run out of steam? I don't know. But I think there are some questionable selections by him, which are valid, absolutely valid. But I haven't watched England play since a couple of qualifiers, I think, last year. I haven't really been following international football since last year. Hmm, I think yeah, it's what I call second season syndrome. Obviously, doing well at the expectations there because of the World Cup positioning. They finished fourth overall, um, but they improved on where they were previously, and there is expectation there. And now reality's set in, and limitations have been exposed, be it tactically or selection. And I think selection's a big problem with that. When you're leaving out players like Grealish and going with players like Carl Walker as a leadership role, as one of the senior figures in the team, with some of his off-field indiscretions, which are even worse than I think Grealish's. Yeah, that does raise some eyebrows when it comes to, is he the right man for the job? You know, is his policy on selection and who and I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens long term and with the Euros next year, if they do take place, where England finish and how England do. If they don't get out the group stage or they have a real poor tournament, then yeah, he's got to go. I think fans aren't happy with the direction that the team are taking. Selections have been questionable, absolutely. On the Lewis Hamilton overtaking Michael Schumacher record, I think Michael Schumacher won at a better win percentage than Hamilton. Even when I look at it like when Lewis Hamilton was at McLaren, McLaren was starting to become less competitive. When you look at Schumacher at Ferrari, when Ferrari were less competitive, Schumacher won more races in a less competitive car against a more competitive field. You look at the field that Hamilton's racing in, how many of them have been F1 champion? You look at the field Schumacher was racing in, and you had Damon Hill, world champion. Mika Hakkinen won back-to-back titles in '98 and '99. Schumacher raced against how many champions? You had Damon Hill in there. You had Jack Villeneuve, another champion. Mika Hakkinen, and then Alonso became world champion while he was still racing. He was racing against 5 or 6 world champions at one point when he was at, Ferrari in the early years, his first half at Ferrari. There were 5 or 6 world champions on the grid. How many world champions were on the grid against Lewis Hamilton? Alonso's returning, we know that. Kimi Raikkonen. That's it. So there's no world champions on the grid because, Nico Rosberg's retired. achieved his dream, become world champion. That's enough for me. Lewis Hamilton is racing against less world champions than Schumacher. Yes, he's won more races now by one race, but it took him longer to get there. And the fact that when it comes to engine suppliers, Mercedes has the best engine, Honda's pulling out of the sport, Ferrari has a weaker engine, and Renault is a mess, tells you what you need to know. Is he a good driver? Yeah. Put him in an uncompetitive car, he's less successful than Schumacher. Mika Hakkinen in an uncompetitive car still won races. Raikkonen won races in an uncompetitive car before he was world champion. Hamilton is racing against less world champions than Schumacher. That's how you compare it. The quality on the grid, not the quality of machine. That's my opinion. The quality on the grid. And Schumacher won titles without Ferrari. He won 2 titles at Benetton. Hamilton won 1 title with McLaren in a more competitive grid. And yeah, when Schumacher left Benetton in '95, went Ferrari in '96, that Ferrari car was unreliable to fuck. I have a tape of that season. I mean, Eddie Irvine kept breaking down, and Schumacher was racing against multiple world champions on that grid. Multiple world champions. He's the best driver right now. Yeah, sure. You could argue that, but you put him in a less competitive car and see if he can drive the nuts off it. Because Raikkonen, with Ferrari at times was still getting the odd win here or there in a very uncompetitive car. Vettel has only won titles with one team and one engine supplier. You've got Vettel and Raikkonen on the grid. Alonso's coming back. Vettel, again, was winning races in an uncompetitive car. So the debate's there. I mean, Vettel could win a couple more titles. Yeah, I think there's time for Vettel to win a couple more. Raikkonen and Alonso at the end of their careers. But there's some young talent coming through that I think it will be interesting. Like Daniel Ricciardo could nick a world title in there. Be interesting. But look at the amount of drivers on the grid with race wins to their name as well. Not just titles, but race wins. And you find it's a less competitive grid than when Schumacher was racing throughout his entire career. Bear that in mind. And Schumacher developed the car to help develop the team that Hamilton's racing for now. Jenson Button, when it was Brawn, won the title with that team and laid the platform for what Mercedes is now. So you look at Mercedes history. You had Rosberg and Schumacher. Hamilton not happy with McLaren, has a breakdown relationship with Ron Dennis, goes over for double the money, and it did take a couple of seasons for him to win. Didn't happen overnight because the car wasn't great. It'll be interesting to see what happens with those contract negotiations because he's arguing for double what the salary cap is allowed. There's a debate over there's a debate over the regulations and then the change in car rules going forward. His political stances, I don't necessarily agree with everything. I do believe that there is an issue with racial discrimination, not just in sport. There are better ways to go about it. Politics and sport should be more separated than they are. The way he's gone about his stance on things, I don't think he's won him any friends. I think it's cost him a lot of supporters. But I would argue it's the machinery he's using and the less competitive field he is racing in. Yeah, you got a Raikkonen on the grid. He's not the driver he was. His career's nearly over. He's just winding down his career, but he still wants to race. And Raikkonen did take several years out of F1 to do rallying in the World Rally Championship, where he funded his own team out of his own pocket with a Fiat Abarth Punto, which he famously wrote off in one of the Scandinavian rallies and went, oh well, it's happened. He is a character out the race guy. Raikkonen's hilarious. Alonso coming back, he's taken some seasons out of F1, so he hasn't raced consistently through, and he's a multiple world champion as well. And Vettel is moving on teams next year to go to a new team. So there's a lot of change on that grid, But you look at the amount of wins on that grid, it's not a lot of wins outside a handful of drivers. Whereas when Schumacher was racing, you had Coulthard, you had Damon Hill, Jacques Villeneuve, Eddie Irvine won races, Jean Alesi had a win or two in there. Olivier Panis, won a race with Ligier at Monaco in '96 in the rain. You had other race winners on that grid, and there was more race winning depth on that grid. In Schumacher, from the beginning of his career all the way through to the end of his career, there were more drivers who had won races actively racing. So for me, I think Schumacher's era was more competitive, even though Schumacher won all those titles back in a row. Won 5 titles in a row. He had a long spell where he didn't win. He won 2 with Benetton, and then he had 4 years where other drivers won. Big gap. And then he won consistently. Then he took some time out of the sport, retired, and then he came back. And he wasn't the same driver. Now, yes, he raced into his 40s. Will Hamilton do that? I don't think so. I don't think Hamilton does that. Kimi Räikkönen, for example, big gap out of the sport, took several years out, did World Rally and European Rally Championship, and was quite good fun to watch. And it wasn't that he wasn't winning; he just wanted to race, and he didn't get the contract he wanted with Ferrari, so he funded his own rally team in an independent Fiat, an uncompetitive Fiat, and he ragged the nuts off it, and he had fun. That's the difference, I think, between Hamilton and other drivers. Is Kimi Räikkönen, for example, is one of my favourite drivers. He's only won the 1 World Championship title, like Nico Rosberg, but he races for the fun of it. Really, he races because he enjoys going fast and doing stuff that most kids, especially boys, grow up to want to do. Right? You watch him when he was doing his rallying. It is absolutely hilarious. Some of his interviews, the way he's so relaxed, he's just having fun. He's paying for his own team out of his own pocket. He's paying all the mechanics, all his engineers out of his own money. It was his team. Single car with a co-driver driving his car. And I forget, he had this really horrific, he had a very dangerous accident, could have killed himself. He rolls the car into some trees on one of these Scandinavian winter rally. I think it was Rally Sweden or Rally Finland. It was in the snow. He's rolled the car. Bad accident. Climbs out the car. He's sat on the bonnet. He's looking at the car. Chuckles to himself. The car is wrecked. Absolutely destroyed. Interview guys. That was a bad shunt, Kimi. Are you okay? He said, no, I'm fine. What about the car? We can buy another one. It's okay. I mean, look, we had good fun. I got the corner wrong. So what? Yeah, I got the corner wrong. The fact he nearly killed himself, he goes, I got the corner wrong, and he just shrugged it off like it, everyday thing. And he goes, don't worry, next rally we're back. We'll pay for a new chassis. I think he said I'll pay for a new chassis, and then I'll help the boys develop the car. We'll be ready for next week or next month. And true to his word, brand new chassis comes back, and yeah, he's finishing like 15th, 20th in the rally or something in an independent team. He's having fun. That's the difference. That is the key difference between Hamilton, Raikkonen, or whoever. Raikkonen on the grid has fun. He's racing for the joy of the sport. I mean, even Mika Hakkinen now, he may retire as an F1 driver. He's Mika Salo, another ex F1 driver. I like the Finns for some reason. They're still doing amateur rallies. They're still doing the national championship. They're still putting the helmet and leathers on and getting in the car, in the overalls, and driving for the fun of it. They may not win every race or every rally, but they're getting in the car and they're giving it a go. Nigel Mansell did touring cars for a bit. F1 champion, and I'll give touring cars a go. There's something for you. Fernando Alonso, I'll give the Indy series a go, the Indy 500. I'll give another class of racing at the top level a go. That is the difference. Pablo Montoya, another race winner when Michael Schumacher was at his peak, went to NASCAR for a good few seasons. Different style of motorsport, gave it a go. Hamilton, he doesn't, I don't know what it is. Yes, he's a consummate professional when it comes to driving. But is he doing it as well as his job? Does he enjoy doing it? Because to me, his personality is lacking. Is he a great driver? Yeah, he's look, brilliant driver. But personality-wise, he's winning himself no friends, and his demands for this and that aren't winning him any friends either. It's the way he carries himself. It's got nothing to do with the colour of his skin, nothing to do with his ability. His ability's there. We know he's there. Yes, he's won a record on paper. Yes, most race wins in F1 on paper. Chasing another world title on paper. It's all stats. In what I like to see with athletes, racing drivers, you know, rugby players, rugby league players, ice hockey players, personality needs to come out as well a little bit. You need to have some characters, and they may not be the most successful player. They may not be the most successful driver or rider or skier or whatever it is, as long as they have personality. And I think that's lacking more and more. We're getting more and more PR based interviews, more sterilized characters where they can't express themselves. And we're living in this social media world. And I look at the social media comments, and some of them aren't great. Yes, I think sometimes Lewis Hamilton doesn't think before he speaks. But you need characters in sport who can actually be relaxed in front of the interview cameras without an agenda and just say, "Yeah, this is how I feel." Yes, there is that young 17-year-old academy player from Man City who did take his life over lockdown by being released, and this is where I have issue with Man City's youth policy. This is where I have issue with the Man City youth policy, and I have done from day one. Why is it that Micah Richards, Phil Foden are the only two players that I can think of, right off the top of my head, Foden and Micah Richards from the early days, that have come through that Man City academy since Sheikh Mansour take over in 2007? That is a concern for me. Although Micah Richards, I think, was already floating around the first team before the takeover. It's not good. It's same with Chelsea. They're abusing the youth system. It boggles my mind. Are they really developing local talent? Because Man United are continuing, and Liverpool continually churn out youth talent. Everton churn out. Even Newcastle with their weakened academy system right now, with how messed up the Ashley area is, they continue to churn out talent. Whether they are great players, they're still professional football players. Crewe Alexandra, for Christ's sake, continue to churn out good players out of their academy, and they're a League One or League Two club. Some of these clubs continue to churn out, and they regularly make first team football at their prospective club. Others, it's just business. It makes them money, and they abuse the system. Hence why rules have been brought in place. Hence why Chelsea got a transfer ban. Man City, I don't know. Yeah, Chelsea got a transfer ban. Man City are running the risk of the same thing, and Man City are already at war with UEFA and the FA, always pleading we're being picked on. Stop abusing the system. There are rules in place to stop the system being abused. Chelsea were caught abusing it. Man City are going to get caught abusing it. Sancho left for a reason. Look at him now. And now clubs want to buy him back into the Premier League. No, he's happy at Dortmund because he's getting regular first team football. He's a key part of that Dortmund setup. And the style of football suits Jadon Sancho. And he's thriving in Germany. Getting a lot of game time, a lot of experience, really honing his skills. He's playing a different style of football, a different tempo of football. He's experiencing European football at a young age. I mean, yeah, I look at English football, and some clubs produce more youth talent than others. And Crewe Alexandra are a prime example of a lower league club that regularly churns out youth players who then make it at senior level, who then go on to play in League One or League Two, wherever it is, all up to the Premier League. Churn them out. Danny Murphy, there you go. While he's not the best pundit in the world, still a top flight player, playing for Fulham and obviously Liverpool, and with reasonable success, and being part of cup final teams and silverware, trophy winning teams. Played in a couple of European and FA Cup finals and all that. Crewe Alexandra came through the Crewe system, and that's a lower league club. got his opportunity at Crewe, got regular first team football. Liverpool come along, go, we like the look of that player. We can develop him a bit more. And he's a good solid midfield player. Not the best, but good solid midfield player. We believe he can take that next step. Go to Crewe. And they didn't pay a lot for him. Plays Liverpool, wins a couple of FA Cups, and then ends up with Fulham in a Europa League final in 2010. So youth development isn't about just playing for your club. It's about developing players who may play for your club, may play for another club. And, you know, is what it is. Oh, look, Man City, I mean, yeah, they're not doing their best with all that money that they've got in the club. There should be more youth talent on display. There should be a hell of a lot more youth talent on display than what City are putting out every week. I think there has to be at some point. That's another thing that I think needs to be mentioned. I think there needs to be rules put in place for more homegrown talent at clubs to be on display in the Premier League and Championship and League One and League Two, where homegrown talent, as in developed by said club, needs to be on the pitch or in the squad. There needs to be more pathways because the amount of players that don't make it. That's why that 17-year-old took his own life. He wasn't. They didn't prepare him for the fact that if you don't quite make it at the top flight or into professional football at the senior level, it doesn't matter if it's a lower league club or not. How to prepare for a life without sport. Happens to senior players as well when they retire. They're at a loss to what to do, and they're not necessarily guided into their post-career life outside of the sport. Doesn't matter if it's football, could be rugby league, could be rugby union, could be cricket. And I think that's a problem with the system that we have in place. Is it's so easy just to buy big name players in from abroad or other clubs for big money, and these kids don't have a career like Steven Gerrard or even Tony Hibbert at Everton, for example. There's another one club man, his product, Carragher. You know, Gerrard came on as I think an 18-year-old for Liverpool, and then played the best part of his career with Liverpool. Obviously didn't win the league with them, but won a fair few trophies. Goes on to LA Galaxy and had finished up his career there, and now is a pretty good manager at Rangers, with them leading the SPL at this current time. Again, these young players aren't getting the chances they deserve because they're putting the effort in the youth team. And with the amount of positive tests that we've seen for COVID, I can see more and more players testing positive, and then these youth players might get their chance because clearly these players, I don't know what the biosecurity rules are for football. Rugby league's in a mess. So questions have to be asked about the biosecurity protocols that are in place for football, rugby union, rugby league, because players keep testing positive and keep, you know, putting games at risk. Games are being postponed. Games are being cancelled. Games are being forfeited in rugby league. So football won't be far behind. If too many players test positive, I can see a shutdown of league football, and that would be the end for League One and League Two. We were already debating whether, like, you know, how many clubs could go out of business. We could see League One and League Two clubs go out of business completely. Maybe some Championship clubs go out of business because the way things are working right now, I mean, look, I think Man City are treading a fine line between, you know, ending up like Chelsea with transfer bans and fines, or not. And the rules are in place for a reason. And what we've seen with the England squad, and we can argue whether Southgate's the right man or not, is more talent getting in there. And Southgate said we don't have enough homegrown players playing week in, week out in the Football League system in this country. And he did state at one point, I might have to look at the Championship for players, which is an indictment on the Premier League. And is what it is. And at the end of the day, you know, something does need to change with the structures in English football. There needs to be some kind of look at the German system, look at the Italian system, look at the Spanish. More homegrown talent is playing in those leagues. and it pays off. It pays off. Look how many championships, right? The Germans have won. The Italians have won. Spain obviously had their decade of dominance. And look at the amount of homegrown talent that plays week in, week out in their league structure, regardless if it's at Barcelona or at Real Madrid or Atletico or Juventus, all the way down to the lower levels. The percentage of players playing, right, week in, week out of homegrown nationality is in the 50 to 70% bracket in European leagues at the top level. England is about 40%. It's starting to go up a little bit, but at one point it dropped as low as I think as 20% on one match day weekend in the top 4 professional leagues in this country. And people wonder why England are not very good at tournament football and why, since Italian ID and the rise of the Premier League, England's tournament performances, apart from Euro 96 and the World Cup in 2018, we have struggled to get past the quarter-final stage, and at one point didn't get out of the group stage of tournament. And why it's been since 1966 at senior level that we've won anything. And then you look at clubs and their match day lists, right? And the nation of origin and who they're registered to play for. And look at the percentage of English or home nation talent. We'll go home nation because obviously we've got Welsh clubs in the English league system and of course all that. We are dropping down below 40% on a match day weekend in the top 4 English leagues of homegrown talent. And then when you come to select a squad, and this is where, whether you agree with Southgate big manager or not, he stated there's not enough homegrown talent playing in the Premier League. I may have to look at the Championship for players. For me, that is a problem. There is a reason why England have not been successful in international football, apart from in the last couple of years with the youth teams starting to be successful, is the lack of exposure of these players to top 5 football on a regular basis. And if the lower league clubs do start going bust, that is going to have a knock-on impact on the quality of player developed and the quality of the national side and the quality of the sport that we end up watching. And if you look at the German system, and I'm going to say the German system, fans have more involvement in how the clubs are run. Fans have more involvement in how the clubs are run. End of. Right? Fans have a 50% stake generally, apart from what's the club? There is a club where there is disagreement about the ownership in German football. I forget which one it is. It's in the Bundesliga. But for the most part, German clubs have massive fan involvement in how the club is run, the direction the club takes. It's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. You get fans involved with the day-to-day running of clubs and ownership. And you look at the German system, and they're I think Germany is the highest percentage of players of German nationality playing in the Bundesliga top 3 tiers. Compared to England in the top professional leagues, it's 20% lower. The German system works. And look at the quality and the history of the national side. No-brainer. It's a no-brainer. There's a higher percentage of homegrown talent playing in German football, right, than English football. Higher percentage. 20% points higher. It's a no-brainer. Again, the Premier League trying to bypass the governing body for a special dispensation from the government. Again, doesn't sit well with me. Again, we've seen, I think, was it last week, that Gary Neville and Sidney Bernstein being the former chairman of the FA, by the way, so he is an ex-administrator in the game, saying we need an independent regulator for football. Football cannot reform itself, cannot regulate itself. What we've seen during this lockdown period, for example, the first stage of the lockdown, where the PFA were advising the players not to take wage cuts or salary deferrals, where clubs were furloughing non-playing staff whilst not cutting wages of players. That went down badly with fans. fans responded in a very negative way. Football has a way of regularly shooting itself in the foot. The capacity for self-harm that football has no bounds. None. None. There is no bounds that football has for its capacity for self-harm at all, in my eyes. It covered itself in no glory since March. And in the last month or so, the negative press coming out with how the game is governed. The ideas put forward by individual clubs to increase their own power and their own wealth at the expense of others, and the future integrity of the game and the structure of the game going forward and the development of the game going forward, it worries me. Now, football is not my favourite sport. Putting that out, football is not my favourite sport. Not by a long shot. Other sports have a better way of governing themselves. And even then, there's issues with governance. I look at rugby league. Rugby league has no universal, international governance of the game. Cricket. I love cricket. But cricket's in a right mess. Again, poor governance. Look at that. Rugby union is in trouble. There is disunity between the various unions about the direction the game should take at regional and international. I think when you I think these debates need to be had. If let's go for a more minor sport like British ice hockey. They're looking at the fact that they're going to have to restructure their league structure. They're going to have to restructure their governance and try and unify all the various leagues from the elite league, which has its own governance, to the national league and then the amateur leagues. They've come out and said, look, we need to reassess our position. We don't have a lot of money. We're a minority sport. Like, we need to assess and put forward proposals to restructure and make sure the sport can continue post-COVID. The sport is at risk of not being able to survive in its current form. That's a minority sport going, we need to fix things. And it's a brave sport to do that. Football, the clubs seem to be ones wielding the power. The governing bodies seem to be toothless. Fans are not very happy with the direction the sport's taking. The clubs are at war with the Football League and the Premier League and the FA. The FA is at war with themselves. The Premier League clubs are at war with themselves. The players' union is at war with the clubs and the FA. You know, the lower league, the non-league, is being shafted by the FA. The rescue package, they're negotiating rescue package. Basically, the richer clubs are trying to bribe the poorer clubs to shut up about their concerns. And all the while, the fans have no say in any of this. The ones who are the bread and butter. Because without the fans buying the tickets, buying the merchandise, buying the TV packages, if they continue to do so, the pay-per-view debate, I'm going to finish on the pay-per-view debate on this, has summed up how greedy the Premier League has become and how out of touch the Premier League is with, its fan base, its customer base. The Premier League is more concerned about selling itself abroad than trying to keep the domestic market happy. Hence the change of kickoff times for TV, which fans have hated for 28 years. The devaluing of the domestic cup competitions. Fans have been pissed off about this for years. I think football needs to, be it nationally in England or the UK, or more globally across like Europe, or at higher levels like FIFA, needs to completely look at itself and go, and this is the state. This is the fans need a big say in this. Clubs are at war with each other. Players are at war with their. It's just the whole thing's a mess. There's too much money in the sport at the top end and not enough at the bottom end. It's a problem, and the media has a part to play in it as well. No, okay, right. So, what do I think about the new ice hockey structure will be? Right, let's have a look at the National League. Basingstoke and Hull, their rinks are falling apart. Leeds could run out of cash. They've only been going a year or so. Um, the Bracknell one, I think, no, Bracknell and Slough, I've been well informed about this. I've been following this because I've got friends who play for the rec teams locally. I've got friends who play for the Bees and everything. I follow social media, followed it from the whole mess that was the rink closure at Bracknell. Slough are very, very happy for the, the, the Bees to be there. It increases their revenue for that rink because it's council owned. Slough are very, very happy they can share their youth facilities. So they've combined the youth setup of both Bracknell and Slough. So the two clubs are basically combined pretty much. There is no scheduling issue. They've merged the youth setups together. Bracknell play in the higher league, Slough in the lower league. That is a positive outcome. The whole situation, I've heard, yes, there are concerns about the ongoing concerns about the state of the Hull Arena, which is the same age as the Bracknell Arena and the same age as the Basingstoke Arena, but all built in 1986-87. Leeds, yeah, cash is a problem, and they are in a tier 3 lockdown area, I believe. So that part of Yorkshire is in a mess economically now. I have heard about the Burnley takeover. I'll discuss that in a minute. On the British ice hockey thing, yeah, the concerns with Basingstoke have been there since before COVID with the rink. That's a long-standing issue. The whole issue is more recent and has been exacerbated again by the COVID restrictions in place. So that's not cash related. That is as things are. The lead situation, it's an unfortunate situation, but they were a brand new startup team, and you have to obviously build a fan base, build some sponsors there. But yeah, that's is a concern, and this is where the English Ice Hockey Association are looking at structures and changes to how the sport's governed and communication with rink operators and councils going forward. Money is an issue for the sport nationally. End of. I mean, the Glasgow Clan with the Braehead Arena, that's a concern that's been going on as well because the arena operators have gone into administration. And Glasgow is a quite a COVID hotspot as well. I think the EIHL may cease to be, and there may be a complete restructuring of the league structure going forward. And there could be a brand new league structure going forward. If Glasgow go out, the Murrayfield Races, the Edinburgh Murrayfield Rink is also another one that's got up the Swanee. Yeah, the league, the sports structure in this country is up for discussion. The Bracknell situation, I've had strong words with the council down here on social media. I'm not a big fan of their response. I think it's callous. Their response. Bearing in mind, they just bailed out everyone active because they've had to need a bailout, but they wouldn't help with the rink because it was privately owned. Which there's some callous. I mean, I don't want to get into politics, but there's some politics involved with all these issues. But the thing is, unfortunately, there's too many of these arenas in private hands, which are public facilities, plain and simple. We've had the discussion before. You know, the Spectrum in Guildford is not in good condition either. The roof is in dire need of repair. Again, a similar age. You know, and the Scottish teams are in trouble. Absolutely, it's a known fact. It's a known fact that yeah, with what's going on with you know COVID, that is a problem. And you know, the Scottish clubs do give a lot of players for the national side, and the Belfast Giants. I mean, Christ, the Ireland is looking at a national lockdown, and does that include Northern Ireland? You know, the whole thing is quite worrying. So the English Ice Hockey Association and the Elite League are in discussions about restructuring the governing body and the league format and the league structures from what is the Elite League now, National League One, or the National League, which is where Wildcats, the Bees, the Bison, and all that, the Pirates, the Chiefs, the Steel Dogs. It will be interesting to see what happens with the sport post COVID. I'll have to read the English Ice Hockey Association's statement they've released. The Elite League, I think, are in discussions with the national governing bodies of both Scottish ice hockey. Below the Elite League has its own national governing body, the Scottish National League, and has a Scottish Ice Hockey Association governing body as well. I think Wales comes under the English Ice Hockey Association. So the governing bodies are in discussions about a structure change and a governance change to cover the whole country. Money's a problem, but the rink issues, Basingstoke, that rink has had it. I can't see that being safe to continue using. If the Bracknell rink was shut down because apparently it cost too much to refurb, which is a load of horse, it's because the land behind's been sold for property development. We all know that. We all know it's going to become flats. The council want that to be so. They said market forces, even though pre-COVID it was starting to turn a profit for the last 6 months. So it's it's the whole thing's a shambles. But the sport has realised, we need to reform to survive. Problem is, how many teams will go out of business? How many rinks will go out of business? It's a concern. And the proposals put forward for the new rink in Bracknell are a joke. And a potential other site has been found. The Basingstoke situation has been dragging on pre-COVID. Well known. I've read all the reports. They date the issue because they're some of the lads I work with are from the Basingstoke area originally. When we do overtime on Saturdays, one of the guys who comes from another depot on overtime on Saturday said, "Oh, you used to play for them," and it's a shambles. But this is what happens when you have private ownership of public facilities. This was going to happen at some point. Unfortunately, COVID was the reason why this structure in the UK at least doesn't work, and why more public facilities should be run by the public for the public. But that's a debate for another day. Money in British ice hockey. We lurch from one crisis to the next on a daily basis in British ice hockey, or one season to the next. We've seen it with Manchester. We've seen it many seasons with Bracknell. We've seen it in Basingstoke. We've seen it with the Raiders in Romford, London Raiders, whatever they are now. We've seen it in the old Super League days teams. We've seen it with the EPIHL, which was a great league to watch, second tier, as professional league going bust, because Milton Keynes and Guildford decided to go to the Elite League when Milton Keynes couldn't afford to do it. And it ruined the second tier of British ice hockey, which led to further problems where Invicta had to crowdfund, MK Thunder had to crowdfund, the MK Lightning basically went bust and had to drop down a level. The Edinburgh Capitals went out of it. Pre-COVID, British ice hockey was in a mess financially, off the ice. On the ice, the product was brilliant. I have no doubt that it's not the best league in the world. It's not the most quality ice hockey out there, but my God, it was fun to watch and fun to go to games and fun to fundraise for and volunteer for and watch games and be involved and buy me tickets, buy me merchandise. I'm just going to have loads of hockey jerseys. I've got more hockey jerseys coming at some point. The situation is, and I'm being clear on this, is the national media, not the local media. The local media did a great job. The local media always does a great job in promoting the local hockey teams in this country. The national media has a phobia of, even when you look at the BBC website, the issues within their articles, the complete lack of care, the lack of research, the lack of knowledge, the lack of giving a fuck rings true. The media establishment doesn't want to sell this product, which is a brilliant product. If it had a better TV deal, right, and an outreach to a wider audience, I tell you now, the Elite League, the National League, would sell itself. It would sell itself. And you look at when they restructured the second tier, it was a shambles. You had the haves and the have-nots, and it was so clear with the rosters, the haves and have-nots. And yeah, Bracknell were the weakest of the former EPI AHL teams. You know, and even then, the haves and have-nots. A Bracknell team that was crap was battering sides 10, 12-0. And in the end, they just put the crap goalkeeper in so the other team could score a couple of goals. That's not a competition. That's not a competitive league. The following seasons got better, and they got rid of the promotion relegation. It improved, and they restructured it, and it improved. But my God, the lack of consistency, where you had 4 or 5 teams that would regularly batter the other 4 or 5 teams. I mean, Cardiff didn't even win a game. You know, and the quality gap was embarrassing. It was a poorly thought out structural change. All they had to do was keep the remaining 7 and invite 3 teams in. 3 teams in. Maybe one team, just one team, make it an 8-team league. And they didn't do that. And then at the end of that, embarrassment by the Cardiff Fire, and some other really bad, and Streatham. Okay, the Raiders were the only team that really did have the muscle to compete, but Streatham, Invicta, Cardiff, that in itself was just cringe watching a team get battered double figures every night. It wasn't fair on them. And to be honest, it wasn't really a challenge for the team playing them, it was just practice. So the next game, that team that beat them 10-0 will probably lose 3-2 in a close game because they hadn't had to happy playing in a pressure environment. Yeah, I mean, when you're putting out basically your reserve squad against a full strength team, that is again an embarrassment of the quality level. And I felt sorry for the Cardiff Fire players. I mean, they only got points awards them because their games got postponed because of weather concerns. I think it was weather concerns because of some heavy snow meant some games couldn't take place. They were just awarded some points. The fact they got 1 overtime loss or 2 overtime losses and then a draw awarded to them because of weather under league rules saying because a game has to be cancelled due to unforeseen circumstances. They got 3 points to them were overtime losses. They didn't win a single game. I'm sorry, that is not fair on that team who've done really well at the level below, and it's not really fair on the teams that have to play them because how can you get yourself up for that kind of game? You know, you're going to be playing your youth team and they're still winning. It shows poor foresight in the formation of those leagues, the North and South, post EPIHL. All they had to do was look at the 3 best teams, or the 2 best teams, or the 4 best teams, or the 5 best teams from North and South, and go, right, can you physically, financially afford a squad that can compete against the higher level? All they had to do, I think, was probably choose the North-South champion, possibly, after the playoffs and go, right, bang, you're in, 8-team league, and let's slowly grow this to 10 teams, and then we might have a competitive league. They didn't do that. They went, right, we'll halve the EPIHL and then shove them into the league structure, wriggle it around a little bit, and it turned to be a really cringe affair. I felt sorry for the Cardiff team because they couldn't form a team for the next season at that level, and that does nothing for player development. It does nothing for growing the game at the lower level. When you, it's like non-league football. I mean, you get some results which are at 10-0. It's like pub football. My mate was playing for a pub Sunday league team, and they won I think 2 games all season, and they conceded over 90 goals in that season. Scored I think 15, and there were some results that were 13, 14-0. And you know they got battered, and he's had enough of it. He had enough of being the best goalkeeper in the squad and going, well, I'm stopping 89, 90% shot save. But they were looking at how many shots he saved, and he's going, I'm still conceding 13 goals a game, and yet I'm the only guy actually putting effort in, or actually at the same level as the team opposite. It's when I give up. Yes, I have seen the article with the Barbarians players because there was 11 players initially reported to have breached the lockdown protocols, which led to the game being cancelled at Twickenham. Now it's 13. Again, you have to. It's concerning, but the lost revenue compounds the losses already suffered because the Six Nations couldn't be completed on time. Now, I know they're completing them now, but the lack of fans in stadiums is hurting not just the RFU, but the Irish Rugby Football Union, the Scottish and Welsh unions, the French union, the Italian union. So the Six Nations, right? People go, oh, Italy should be kicked out. Have you seen how Georgia have been playing lately? I think Italy should stay in. You know, you know the financial losses suffered by the Six Nations, the six unions, are worrying. There is more state involvement with the Italian union. The French league has more money in it than the English league for wages and ownership and fees paid to the French union. Again, there's a bit more state involvement with the French Federation as well. The four home unions, because I include Ireland as a home union because of Northern Ireland and Ulster. Yeah, Scotland and Wales have had to furlough and well, make staff redundant. Okay. Ireland, it's a tricky one because obviously Ulster are technically a British club and Ireland is Ireland. So I don't know how that works on the Irish Rugby Football Union, but you have a British province, which is Northern Ireland, which is part of the Irish unions. There's a crossover there where there's discussions with the Westminster government and the Dublin government about helping with assistance financially for the Irish Rugby Union. But the RFU's made massive losses. The Welsh and Scottish unions are in serious financial trouble. Ireland, I'm not so sure about the Irish union and their financial situation. We'll have to wait and see what comes out of that and if they do release the figures. But I believe the Ulster side of things and those players from Northern Ireland and there is some British taxpayer money and government assistance coming in with the running of the union. They've got the Six Nations restarted. They're playing the remaining games that were cancelled, obviously, back in March. But yeah, the lost revenue's been felt, and now the Barbarians players' misbehaviour. Yeah, it's a one-off game. It's not a tour or anything like that. The Barbarians, I love watching the Barbars play. Okay, it's a leftover from the amateur era, but yeah, that's a more lost revenue for the RFU. It's not a good look for a sport that already has money issues. And at a time when the rival coding league is having so many games cancelled and abandoned because players are testing, whole squads are going down with COVID. Whole squads in rugby league are going down with COVID. Wakefield have been hammered. Salford have had players test positive. It makes so. But when you've got players and coaches lying about breaches, that's that for them. I think there should be bans imposed on those players and coaches. I think there should be punishments, down the line by World Rugby. It's not just the RFU; it's World Rugby governs International Rugby Union. And yes, the RFU are the hosts in this case for the Barbarians, but these are international players. These are international coaches. These are registered players with their various unions. They should be punished. If that means they're suspended by their unions for club play as well, or international play, and fined, the fact they've lied is not good. The issue is this: it's a one-off game. Now, if that is, let's say, in like Exeter obviously just won the European Cup, right, and they've won the Premiership. Let's say, hypothetically, next season, COVID's still obviously going to be around. Let's say if Exeter and Wasps, for example, I think, and Wasps players were to break lockdown before the game comes out, Wasps and the club and the players should be punished. Because it's a one-off game with the Barbars, it's a bit more difficult, but I do think those individual players that have been involved in these breaches and lied should be suspended and punished. And the coaches as well, who also lied about it, should have suspensions and punishments thrown their way. For me, it's the same as doping. It's the same as betting offences. It's the same as off or on-field indiscretions, be it foul play or something happening off the field. You're representing your sport. You're representing the jersey you wear. I think there will be some retrospective punishment coming to these players and coaches. I can see a lot of fallout from this going down the line. If World Rugby and the various governing bodies that cover these players, these various unions, these are all a mix of international players and the barbars, right? They need to show a unified response. These players need to be punished accordingly. That's my opinion. That is my opinion on that. We saw in the NRL, I'm going back to rugby league in Australia, and that might infuriate some people, but when there were lockdown breaches of the bubble, because they negotiated with the Australian state governments to get games played, and then they got fans back in stadiums, when players misbehaved, they were fined, they were suspended, they were punished. When coaches misbehaved, breached lockdown, they were fined and suspended and punished. That same thing. Yeah, they're facing charges, but punishments need to be there. They can face the charges, argue, and get suspended punishments, pay a fine. I will read the article when the live stream is over, but I honestly believe that if rugby league in Australia and the AFL in Australia can go, right, you've breached the lockdown protocol, you're getting fined and suspended, docked so many weeks' wages, so many months' wages, suspended for so many weeks, done. Then I can see a precedent being set in other sports. I can see that being carried over. I can see rugby union with the culture of the sport and the way the sport is played and the regard and the public image of the sport, for the most part positive. I can see these players getting rather serious punishment. And you can disagree with rules, and that's where at the end of every season, club officials, union officials, governing bodies, club officials, players, representatives sit down around the table and discuss possible rule changes. That's what happens from season to season. This is where laws of the game and rules are figured out. Is there is a discussion with coaches, with players, with clubs, with the various regional governing bodies when it comes to the international level, where it doesn't matter if it's rugby league, rugby union, football, cricket. The bright sparks allegedly come together, and then that's where rules get evolved and discussed, and then punishments for breaching said rules are put in place. So we'll have to see. But I think punishments should be severe. I'll read the article, and I'll read the various articles. I'll read from more than one site just to corroborate information, because some sites have different bits of their point of view. But I hope that the punishments are severe, and I hope these players and coaches really face strict punishment. Plain and simple. That's my personal opinion. Others will disagree with that. But I think if there's rules in place, even if they're temporary because of COVID, but other rules such as betting, curfew, various other bits, like Cipriani was suspended loads of times with the various clubs for his off-field indiscretions, and he was punished for example. That's why his England career went down the Swanee. The fallout from the 2011 World Cup, players were dropped, players were suspended. The Bath scandal with the coke, players were suspended for lengthy periods of time. A Bloodgate with Harlequins, players and coaches were suspended. So rugby union has a history of coming down very, very strongly with players who transgress and coaches who transgress. If they take a weak stance on this and the punishments are very weak, that's not going to be a good look for the sport. Rugby league, the AFL in Australia, when players and coaches breached the lockdown bubbles that were agreed with the state governments, they were punished. They were fined. They got hammered for their indiscretions. So we'll have to see what happens. But for some reason, professional sport regularly has the ability to shoot itself in the foot when it comes to player or coaching discretions. And in the age of social media, you can't get away with anything. Look, people are going to say England are going to win 100%. And that's most likely what's going to happen. But you've got to turn up on the day, and you've got to play what's in front of you. End of. And if this whole barbarians thing becomes a distraction because they haven't played a competitive match while other teams such as Ireland, France, and Scotland and Wales have, and Italy have as well. The other five nations have all had that extra competitive match under their belt, and England haven't, and they don't play well. They could quite argue the barbarians cost us, but that's called excuses. You have to turn up on the day, and you have to put 180 minutes. Plain and said. But we'll have to see what happens. I mean, look, Italy might be really, pumped up and go, solid, everyone's writing us off, and they might do what they did with Ruckgate all those years ago, where the rules had to change because they embarrassed England for 60 minutes. They could do that again. They are a team that likes thinking outside the box. They know the limitations of the squad they've got, but they've had that extra competitive game which England haven't. So it could be interesting. And, with no fans at Twickenham, you take that out of the equation. Could be an interesting one. It could be an interesting one. And England have been upset, not by Italy, but other teams before. And, in the lead into the World Cup, that game against Scotland where they blew a 30-odd point lead and drew 38 all was the most bizarre game I've ever seen. The Welsh falling apart, this year. Scotland being up and down, the French suddenly turning things around, the Irish, always being consistent. And Italy don't play bad. Let's not forget that. Italy aren't the worst team in the world. They haven't been successful for the last decade, and that is a problem. I still think they're better than Georgia when it comes to, level of competitiveness. Georgia have never beaten a tier one nation. Italy have it in them to have that one big game. This could be that big game. And with no fans in Twickenham, no sweet low swinging chariot, you never know what can happen. And with what the weather's been like the last couple of days, Christ, the weather could have a massive impact on England's style of play and Italy's style of play. Italy want the game to be stop-start. They want it to be slow. They want it to be scrappy. And with how the weather's been, that's going to play into the Italian hands. They're going to have a game plan. England are going to have a game plan. The fact they can't, try out their combinations because the barbarians farce, which is a absolute shambles for the game. It does disrupt preparation, but these are professional athletes, and these are the World Cup finalists. This time last year they were World Cup finalists. Yeah, they got beaten by South Africa, but they beat the All Blacks the game before. This is the World Cup finalists who've gone a long way in the last 5 years from where they were under Stuart Lancaster. They've completely turned their fortune. They've had one bad season in there, but this is the second best team in the world as of last year. When you look at the World Cup, right? And Italy had their best World Cup ever. Admittedly, the game against the All Blacks didn't take place, and Parise couldn't end his career on that note, so he wanted to play the Six Nations. But there you go. Oh, phone call. Right, I'm going to have to end that there. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll obviously discuss things more with you next time. Fuck's sake, Peach.